Apostle of War.
Another poem.
Another poem.
From Pavlov.
It's a marathon for Julian here.
It's all right.
For
I
him
can
to
do it
endure
all
the
night
sleep.
long. Feel like
him
I'm
to
back in my
endure it.
GCSEs.
Yeah.
Poetry anthology.
Ooh.
God knows what.
So
that
this
was
is
about.
as I said, this is the most controversial
Okay.
one because it's a bit darker in its nature. It's a bit more,
Okay.
how should I call it? Well,
Racist.
anyway, you'll see it for yourself.
Okay.
You'll make your own.
Controversial poetry.
Yes.
On Lessons for Life, 24/7. Let's have it.
Apostle of War. So as to survive, so as to live, humans hide to thrive, humans feign to give. And even if truth is desired, who can of it be inquired? Will is the reason, ambition is the meaning. Their denial is self-treason, whose punishment is searing. But as interests antagonize, conflict will always rise. And so the carnage has begun, like so many times in the past. The fire won't spare anyone, until of the pedestals remains one last. A new castle is shaped once more, as the bridge of corpses stretches to its door. The white knight held the flame, but now the flame him grips. As the crimson cape of fame his flesh from bone rips, his black-burned meat and sorrow will be pale ash and death tomorrow. The world prepares for a new play, the stage and actors are ready, but only the main ones have a say, while the supporters stand steady. The curtain is lifted by the puppet dictator, as a mirror is the only spectator. The rulers in the shadow are self-assured, their castles unseen, their power transcendent. And yet their fall is secured, for from fear no being is independent. As a raven through the battle sky will soar, they will be haunted by the Apostle of War. That's it.
Thank you
Very
much.
happy-go-lucky poem.
Yeah, wow. On that cheery note,
I know, right?
what's an apostle?
You're
Let's start
asking
at the beginning. What's
You're
an
asking
apostle?
for a dictionary
Yeah,
definition.
what do you mean, why you chose that word? I mean, it's a very, when I hear
Lord.
apostle, I think of the 12 disciples.
The
or the 12
apostles,
Yeah.
the apostles of Christ.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, to a certain extent, yes, they are.
So it's another Greek word, right?
Yes,
And people use
no.
disciple and apostle interchangeably. The 12 apostles can also be called the 12 disciples.
Yeah, because they were his apprentices.
And I'm guessing
But,
disciple, from disciple we get the word discipline. So committed to something.
committed to something. Yeah.
Okay, so the person who's committed to war.
Yes, according to the the biblical description of an apostle, that would be a relatively accurate description. But for me, especially in this sense, an apostle is more comparable to a more independent figure, like a prophet or
Well, it's definitely got a religious connotation.
It does have sort of a religious connotation to it, and I know about it. I have a religious symbolism here. For example, here, in this one, I have the 4 horsemen of apocalypse.
Yeah.
The white horseman, the
Okay.
red horseman, the black horseman, and the pale
Apocalypse.
horseman. Yeah, from the Bible.
You didn't mention the word apocalypse, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But I did mention different colors and
You
the symbolisms
alluded to it, yeah.
for the 4 horsemen. It's this one. The white knight held the flame. It's the course of an empire, the cycle of an empire. The white knight held the flame. It's the beginning of an empire, the glorious start, the sort of sometimes called as the just war, even though I don't believe in just wars.
Yeah.
But like the start, the beginning of an empire, of prosperity. But now the flame him grips, as the crimson cape of fame his flesh from bone rips. It's the red horseman, when there's the empire is beginning to have internal turmoil. In this case, the crimson cape of fame means the sanctimoniousness, the arrogance of being the ruler will inevitably corrupt any person who's in charge. And they will be burned by their own fame.
So, comparing to the last poem, chronologically, we had the creation of Earth. Is this a little while later?
Yes, this is
Okay.
considerably later.
Okay.
This is, The Historia is the first one chronologically.
Yeah.
Love and Fury is the second one chronologically. The third one chronologically will be Father of Monsters, which I'm going to make very soon, hopefully.
You should listen to a poem, or you could read it, but I've heard listening to it is very emotive. The Rhythm of Time, written by Bobby Sands when he was in prison on hunger strike, and he talks about history and how the truth suffered always, and it suffered at the hands of
in war. Truth is the first casualty.
Yeah. I would have a listen to that or read it if you can. Carnage. That's the flesh being ripped off, right?
Yeah.
And carnage means like mayhem, but literally carnage, carnivorous comes from that, right?
Yes.
Wow.
It's slightly previously, and so the carnage has begun like so many times in the past. You know, it alludes a little bit to the previous one, which was about as interests antagonize, conflict will always rise.
And this will happen at the apocalypse. Or
Not only in the
Armageddon.
Apocalypse, it happened many times throughout history. Like,
but I think a lot of civilizations have predicted an apocalypse or a Armageddon, and they're sort of dreading it, but seeing it also as inevitable, that it will happen.
Perhaps they were predicting their own apocalypse. You know, the word apocalypse is has double meanings, because it can always also mean the end of one thing, so a new thing can begin.
Is that from the word epoch? Okay.
A new epoch.
So apocalypse is like epoch, which
one
is like
epoch
an
ends, another one begins.
Yeah. I've had another discussion about this with Daniel, and epoch and eon, and what does it mean, and the end of the world might be the end of an age.
Yep.
Very interesting, man. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all civilizations eventually fall. So an apocalypse is inevitable to a certain extent. Now, the choice we have is to whether use what the previous epoch has achieved to improve ourselves, or to just destroy everything they invented and they achieved and start from scratch, which is something I'm against. I'm against completely being against the previous epoch. I am for learning with the previous epoch and learning how to move onward from that point. See?
Progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
To be able to learn with the past but keep moving into the future.
We don't need solutions, we need progress.
Well, we need solutions, but we will never have perfect solutions, as I said previously. We need some solutions, but always to always improve, to always keep getting better. And yeah, you know, my personal favorite here is the last part. It says, "As a raven through the battle sky will soar, they will be haunted by the apostle of war." It means that no matter how powerful the people in charge will be, there will always be eventually an insurrection. There will always be a change in terms of the structure of power. There will always be this sort of an apostle of war. And that's what the rulers always fear. The apostle of war is their greatest fear, because he brings the change for a new epoch, brings the apocalypse to a certain extent.
Was Jesus the apostle of war in his time?
Well, Jesus is an interesting case, because Jesus, to his last breath, was a pacifist, at least as far from my knowledge. You know, some historians say that Jesus actually had an army and he went doing some conquests. I have read some of those historians, but I don't really believe in that too much. I think Jesus was, to his very last breath, a pacifist.
But he was armed with dangerous teachings, right?
He was. He was indeed. The Roman Empire was, it was fueled by slavery, and Jesus was preaching against slavery.
Was he? Does he preach against slavery?
Well, he was, but you see, that's the difficult thing, because most of the first followers of Christianity were the slaves and the most downtrodden people, like the people who had the worst in life. Because Christianity preached for equality in the eyes of the Lord.
And he said that there is no male, no female, there is no Greek, no Jew.
Well, yes and no, because Christianity is a bit contradictory in that sense, because they preach for equality, and they appeal to the downtrodden, like Jesus when he went to help the people, the sick, the
leper.
Exactly, the leper, and all that stuff. But at the same time, there were passages in the Bible that were talking about the right way of owning a slave. So it's a bit contradictory,
Look, as I say, 2,000 years ago, everyone kept a slave and it was normal. 1,500 years ago, it was the same. But teachings came along that guided us towards a better society. They might not have given a solution, but they brought progress.
The message was there, but it wasn't all there at that point, because slavery was such a common thing at that time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do you have any? Do you want to ask something else about this? Ask as many questions as you can, because I already know that people are gonna say, "Oh, this Pavlov guy is so aggressive in his poem."
Well, there was aggressive imagery. There was White Knight. You might get the old
the White Horseman.
Yeah, the White Horseman.
Then the Red Horseman, the Black Horseman, and the Pale Horseman. You know what I mean? The White Horseman, the beginning of an empire. The Red Horseman, the beginning of the internal struggle. The Black Horseman, the development and the festering of the internal strife. And the Pale Horseman, the destruction of the empire.
Okay.
From within. Because no powerful empire can be destroyed only from outside. Only from within can an empire fall. It's the only way to start the rot from within. As people say, if the fish starts rotting by the head, and every single nation starts rotting by its rulers.
Do you sense that our nation is rotting like that now?
Well, by our nation, do you mean Ukraine, Portugal, or England?
Well, good question. Ukraine.
Ukraine.
As an honorary Ukrainian. No, let's go with Europe then, I guess.
Well, Europe.
Oh no, go with Ukraine. Answer it as you wish.
I can just give you examples of Ukraine, of Portugal, and of England.
Yeah.
Ukraine is a bit of a crossroads, because Ukraine right now, if they get the right kind of leadership, the powerful leadership that will appeal to the people and will actually have an interest in providing for their people and not just stealing everything from them like the oligarchs have, then Ukraine has a good potential to greatly improve their quality of life. But the problem is, Ukraine has developed an immunity to that kind of benevolent change, at least for the peaceful change, that is so common of post-USSR countries.
Okay.
That internal corruption is so ingrained in Ukraine that it's practically impossible to change it without any
Do you blame that on the Soviet
means.
times?
Sorry?
Do you blame that on bad habits learned during the Soviet era?
Well, a large blame for that does indeed rest with the Soviet Union, but I don't blame it completely on the Soviet Union. Ukraine has had a very turbulent history, and the biggest problem Ukrainians have is usually with disunity and with treachery inside of their own country. They need to find some kind of unity, and that's why I don't oppose Ukrainian nationalism, because they need something. Ukrainians need something to rally behind. Now, obviously, I don't mean that they should start purging other people and seeing themselves as a superior race and all that bullshit. But I do think they should see themselves as a stronger nation. They should start valuing themselves, because I feel like the Ukrainians see themselves as a border state that is insignificant. They should have some pride. Portugal, for example. Portugal is a completely different country. The problems of Portugal are very different. The biggest problem there is lack of motivation in terms of the people. People just live a quiet life. They're very content in Portugal. They just keep living their quiet lives. They don't strive for better.
What's wrong with that?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just that they slowly fade away with time. They slowly rot away. Some of the elderly people think of their empire as it was glorious, it was great, and nothing wrong with that. They did have an impressive empire. They were relatively mild colonialists. They didn't.
I was in Oman recently, and there were castles built by the Portuguese. I didn't realise the Portuguese were in the Middle East as well. I know they're in India, Goa, and obviously Brazil.
But the Portuguese were everywhere.
Yeah.
But they didn't go very much inland. They stayed in the coast. Yeah, they only built 1 or 2 forts and they stayed there. Portuguese were the very first colonial empire, the ultramarine empire. But yeah, Portuguese have a problem with their motivation, with finding their way, with not losing their way.
Yeah.
Now English are. I'm not as well acquainted with the English people as I am with Portuguese and Ukrainians, obviously, because I've been here last time. But from what I see, there are a few. The English are divided now. And I'm saying English with like this English because I'm saying people who live in England.
Okay.
For example, in London, there aren't so many English people. It's mostly migrants, like myself, for example. The thing is, some of these migrants want to help the country, want to assimilate and to make the country prosper, when others actively hate the country, and they have an ingrained hatred and a desire to resist the authority of England and the culture of England. A desire to eradicate it from within. And that's something I'm honestly a bit scared of.
How have you noticed this? What have you noticed?
Well, a big part of it is in Speaker's Corner. I've noticed many people openly criticizing Britain, which is perfectly fine. I do it myself all the time. But they weren't criticizing it in a constructive way, in the sense that, okay, you're doing this badly, let's do it slightly differently in this way. They were just saying it's bad, it's terrible, the English people are the worst. That's it, just to bash them.
It's always easy to criticize rather than be positive or give positive.
Instead of actually giving some advice.
It's easier to destroy than create. And that's probably true across all cultures.
Yeah. But you know, of course, the English people are not without flaws. From what I notice, there is the stereotype of the English person is to be polite. That's the common stereotype. Now, there are. Let's make a few divisions of English people, at least from my experience. Okay. There are the polite ones, and there are the rude ones.
Okay.
The rude ones are the common folk that go to the football games, that shout the Millwall. Let's give the example with the Millwall.
The great
fans.
Unwashed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. There are
We're
those.
stereotyping now. Yeah.
I am stereotyping, but
rude ruffians.
Yes.
And polite posh people.
But I was surprised by how many people like that are here in England. I was surprised by that. I thought to myself that hooligans didn't really exist here in those kinds of numbers, but apparently they do. I thought in Ukraine and Russia they existed more, but apparently I was wrong.
Football hooligans?
Yeah, football hooligans. Of course, in Ukraine and Russia we have other problems like getting drunk, which is also kind of a problem here, but not as big of a problem as it is in Ukraine and Russia.
Really?
In Ukraine and Russia it's way out of hand.
People tend to drink more in colder countries.
Yes, but it shouldn't be an excuse.
No, sure, I'm not saying it's a good thing.
You don't have to drink to keep warm.
No, but that seems to be how it correlates.
The tendency keeps that way, yeah. But in terms of the polite English, it's pretty interesting, because in terms of the polite ones, there are the naive polite, and there are of course there are the simply polite people, but there are also the superficial politeness. I've noticed it in some numbers here, in considerable numbers, when people are really excessively polite to you, and then when you have the slightest disagreement, that's it. They just show their true colors. They just let it loose on you. You know what I mean? I really those are the kind of people that I dislike the most, honestly. I don't really mind the kind polite, the naive polite people, because they're just kind. They're a bit fragile sometimes, but it's fine. I have nothing against them, honestly. If I had to give an example of that, I would say Kyle from Speaker's Corner. He's a nice guy. He's a good speaker. It's just that I don't agree with his ideology, but he's nice. He's a nice person. You know what I mean? He's a polite guy. Now there are many people who are just superficially polite here, which is unfortunate.
I think they're being polite by not telling us
we'll
get
have
out of
to
here.
Be polite now.
The lights off
actually polite, like the actual polite people.
It would be a polite move. That was Pavlov's guide to the English, rude and otherwise. If you would like to appear on the
rude,
Pavlov,
polite, hypocritical now. I love the English people. Don't worry, guys. I love the English
You
people.
love them all.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't like them. After all.
And if you would like to join Pavlov or myself for the PAVLOVCAST, just send an email to lessonsforlife247@gmail.com and we will invite you.
Especially when you're English.